do the cash walk, do the cash walk. Hey, I'm leaving flaming footprints on the asphalt. Pop your collar, twist your wrist, do the cash walk. I'm dropping dollars while you're wishing on a scratch off. My hollow mama list, she just hit the jackpot. I'm leaving flaming footprints on the asphalt. Pop your collar, twist your wrist, do the cash walk. I'm dropping dollars while you're wishing on a scratch off. My hollow mama list, she just hit the jackpot. I'm leaving flaming footprints on the asphalt. Pop your
The minor details. We are in episode 6 today. And let me tell you something. We are in 24 cities. We are in 5 countries, Pete. This is taking off. We got 2 sponsors, too. We got 2 sponsors for the show. We only have 4 sponsors left. This show is taking off, Pete. How's it going today, Pete? Let's go to Menendez Brothers today.
Wow. Let's go, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Danny, I was so excited when you told me this week that we were downloaded in basically half of the United States, basically half of the US states, as well as huge downloads now in the UK, Australia. You told me Ireland. We've got viewers and fans from around the world. So thank you so much for tuning in, everyone.
We have been downloaded in the Middle East, Pete.
Wow.
Yes, we have followers in the Middle East. Shout out to our followers in the Middle East, our UK followers, our Ireland followers. Listen, this has been a big, humongous week for us, Pete. Like I said, we put out that we wanted sponsors for the show because the show's getting so big, and they just came flying in. So we got 2 sponsors. We have a lawyer's office that will be sponsoring us starting next week. And Pete, I got good news with this lawyer's office.
Okay.
They're willing to put up some reward money. So if we have a case out there that we're very interested in, they're willing to put up reward money for missing people, this and that. So that could be the future of our podcast here. We do have somebody that's willing to put up some reward money in the future for us.
Wow, that's beautiful. And that really warms my heart to know that through this podcast and through our efforts, we're actually able to help not only bring awareness to these crimes and these cases and these laws, but we're trying to help solve these things. We're trying to help get people found who are missing, and we're trying to get to the bottom and unravel the truth. So let's go to our sponsors. In addition to the lawyer's office, we're also going to have a sponsor out of the Tennessee area from Choice Homes. So his name is Jonathan Gordon, Realtor of the Year. If anyone's needing to buy a home in Tennessee or in Georgia, then you can reach out to Jonathan Gordon. So we'll talk more about our sponsors soon.
Yeah. Next week, they'll be on board. And folks, we have 4 more sponsoring spots left. Let's get it out there. We want to make this podcast the place to go for true crime. If somebody's missing, we want to get the word out. That's going to be a thing. And getting somebody in here with reward money will be friggin' huge. If you talking reward money, you're going to be able to get the word out there more. People are going to be looking for people more. He also talked, Pete, that if there's a murder case that's unsolved, he may be able to get reward money for that. So we got a lot of options going, and I just like where this podcast is going.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've been moving in a great direction. 6 episodes in now. We're getting a lot of streams. Just a reminder for everyone out there, you can always listen later. We appreciate everyone tuning in live because we can actually get to your comments or your concerns right away. But you can listen to us on the drive to work. You can listen to us at night before you go to sleep. You can fall asleep to our lovely melodic voices, or you can wake up in the morning and just start jamming some Minor Details podcast anytime.
And you know what, Pete? They said my voice is like really smooth, right? People really like my voice, Pete.
You know, when you're talking, Danny, it's like liquid butter. It's just silk, you know. It's the smoothest, silkiest sound I've ever heard. So
that's what people say to me, Pete. I send you the nice comments people send me.
Dude, you send me the nice comments. You send me the funny comments as well. Do you want to tell everyone what you were called today?
Listen, ladies, a female DM'd me today and called me a zaddy.
Woo!
I have no friggin' clue what a zaddy was, but I was impressed to be called a zaddy. I had to look it up, Pete. It's a good-looking older man that's still stylish and has charisma. That's me. So she was right.
Danny, term you'll probably learn if you haven't heard it already. The kids are all going to say you have Riz. You don't have charisma. You have Riz. Have you heard that one yet?
Yes.
Riz is what a daddy has. So you're a zaddy with Riz. I love it, Danny. Keep it up. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. I see a lot of viewers are tuning in around the world. Thank you for tuning in. Danny, do you want to jump right in to one of our weekly highlights? We have a couple of crazy cases and some crazy laws that have been passed this week and some things that are going on. Do you want to start us off with our weekly highlight?
Listen, Pete, I might, I have that blue that says Danny. I might put Zaddy in there. We might just nickname me Zaddy. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay. You're gonna take the brand. T-shirts.
And listen, we got some comments. Smooth and loud. That's a beautiful voice. And another comment was, "Who likes your smooth voice?" So there's some comments about my voice out there. But listen, Pete,
Nice.
this week I want everybody to sit down. If you're not sitting down, you might want to sit down when I tell you this. I just did a video. A Democratic representative from Chicago, Illinois, wants to pass a bill that you're allowed to assault police officers as long as you have a mental health condition. So, Pete, say you had a bad day at the bar. The cops come and break you up or tell you to leave, and you punch that cop in the face. As long as you go get a doctor's note from your doctor saying you have mental health, you can't be charged. So that's going to be the new law. So how many police officers do you think are going to take that job? You could punch me in the face and not be charged. Could you imagine this, Pete? Could you imagine the stupidity and the non-common sense? It's insane.
Okay, and you're telling me this is in the state of Illinois, where we already have Chicago being one of the centers for gun violence and one of the centers for crime. You're telling me that they're actually passing this? I hope they're not passing this. What I think you're telling me is they're proposing this, right?
It didn't pass yet. It's a bill that's up there that to be passed. And Pete, could you imagine? Think about this. When we called off sick from work or we called off sick from school, right? We'd be like, we got to get a doctor's note. And you all had that doctor that would give you the fucking note. How many people are going to have notes? Charles Manson's going to have a note, right? They're all going to have notes. Look, I could beat up a police officer. I'm mentally disabled. All of them. Pete, it's just stupidity. And I don't know. I hate talking politics on the podcast, but you kind of got to. The Democrats just they just cater to criminals, and I don't get why they're doing this, because they lost the House, they lost the Senate, they lost the presidency. People want to be protected. They want to have cops. They want to be protected. They want their family to feel safe. And to pass these laws, it's stupidity. You look at it, and it's just stupidity. I'm sorry. And I got a lot of comments there. People are making fun out of the law on Instagram. It's crazy. And I totally agree with it.
Absolutely, Danny. I'm like you. I try not to get political, but like you said, it affects everything that we're going through here in American life and even around the world. American politics affects the world. There are ripple effects. So some of these things are just outlandish. And I think any reasonable person would normally say, this is ridiculous. Let's draw the line. But I don't know why some of these people are getting in office that are proposing some of these outrageous things. We obviously have to have security, but we also have to have freedom, Danny. And I don't know the answer. I don't have the answers right now, but I can tell you right now, this law is not the answer.
And you know what? Like, who would come up with this law? Like, were you sitting there thinking to yourself, you know what? I think this is a good law. I'm going to let cops be assaulted as long as somebody has a fucking note from the doctor. Like, I don't get where they're going with this. Like, do you want to have a society with no cops, no laws? Like, what do you want? I don't know what they're going for. Like, what Democrats? If you're a Democrat, you're a liberal. Let me know what you're going for. You want a society with no laws? Because that's basically what you're fucking doing. I just don't get it. Sorry, I get fired up when stupidity comes.
Danny, this brings up a lot of passion with me as well. And I'll tell a personal story really quick. I was actually in the gym yesterday with my brother, Matt, who is in law enforcement. And we had a guy who overheard that Matt was a cop. And he starts talking about how he's a Marine, but cops are pieces of crap. He starts dogging cops. And Danny, let me just tell you, I did very good of controlling myself. I handled the situation. I addressed the guy. I did not punch him in the face, which was my first reaction, but I did address it very professionally. You'd be proud of me, but I shut that guy down because I will not allow my fellow brothers and sisters to be badmouthed. I will absolutely not tolerate that.
It's funny you said that, Pete. I was playing poker one night, okay? And I'm sitting at this poker table, and this guy is going off at the poker table. How bad cops are. Doesn't know I'm a retired cop. How all cops are no fucking good. We don't need cops. Screw cops. This, that, and the other. Finally, after a half hour, I turned to him and said, yeah, I'm a retired cop, fucker. That's what I said to him. And you know what? He looked at me, he didn't know what to say, Pete. He didn't know what to say. And you know what I want to say to people like him? You were never a hero. You
No.
never went into that building when somebody had a gun or when somebody could kill you. I was shot at. I was held fucking hostage. You were never that person. You sat in your little bed and fucking watched TV and watched the news. You were never a fucking hero. I'm sorry, that shit pisses me off.
Yeah, absolutely, Danny. We could definitely go down the rabbit hole, but let's try to keep it moving without getting too much on a tangent. I know it triggers me as well. We do have a couple more cases on the weekly highlight that I'd like to talk about. One thing that I wanted to bring up, a case out of Ohio. I don't know the names. You can look up the names, but Danny, you did a short video on this already. There's a woman who has allegedly kidnapped and held her stepson hostage for 18 years. They just found this guy after like 2 decades. He's like in his early 30s now, and he's been kept hostage in a home. That was just an outrageous story that I heard. I was like, oh my God.
Pete, I did a video this morning. As soon as I woke up this morning, my daughter sent it to me. And listen, when I'm doing content creation, all my followers send me stuff. So I was sent this about 25 times. The stepson, Pete, was 32 years old, right?
Yeah.
32, and he weighed 68 pounds. 68 pounds. Because I was thinking, how could a woman keep somebody, a 32-year-old man, hostage? Because a man is stronger than her, he could overpower her. And I was wondering, but what she did was she didn't feed him, she didn't drink him. He was 60 fucking pounds. He was a 30-year-old man weighing 60 some pounds. It's insane. It's a scary movie, Pete.
Wow. There's so many just horrific things that are happening, and we only get the ones that make it to the news media. We don't hear about a lot of them. Danny, I know you wanted to bring up one more case. Did you want to go ahead and talk about that other case before we jump into our big case today?
Yeah, and we're going to go over the Menendez case. Don't worry, guys. We're going to go over that from beginning to end because, the DA this week in the Menendez case, the new DA, and we'll go over that. He basically said no to them. He's not going to do the resentencing, and we'll talk about that. But I want to talk about another case that really hits home to me, okay? There's a case of an American Indian girl, Emily Pike, in Arizona. She was 14 years old and she was murdered. She was actually cut up into pieces and found in a bag, Pete. 14 years old, American Indian girl. And she was missing for a while before they found her. And Peter, I brought something up. And listen, like I said, I don't like getting political or anything, but when you talk about crime, politics just they're part of it. They're part of it. And here's the thing. And I know people are going to be shocked for me saying this, but I tell the truth. And the truth is, if this girl had blonde hair and blue eyes, Pete, she would have been all over the news because that sells more. It gets them more views. It gets them this. This Emily Pike, if it wasn't for social media, if it wasn't for TikTok, if it wasn't for Instagram, nobody would even have heard about this poor 14-year-old girl that was murdered because she was an Indian girl. If she was a white girl with blonde hair, blue eyes, she'd be all over. And Pete, a lot of people got on me about that, but it's true. And nothing against the blonde hair, blue eye victims. They all need a voice. I'm just saying, give equal time to everybody. And if you think I'm lying, think about this. Natalie Holloway, blonde hair. Gabby Petito, blonde hair. John Benet Ramsey, blonde hair. It's the blonde hair, blue eyes that get out there if they're missing. If you're an Indian, you're a black person, you're a Mexican person, you're not going to get out there. A white person, blonde hair, blue eyes, they're going to put you out there. It's a fact. It's a fact.
Wow, Danny. Well, I'm glad you're bringing awareness to that because, like you said, every victim deserves to have a voice. Every victim deserves to be heard. And on this platform, we're not going to discriminate and leave out cases based on those factors because they're not media friendly. So you're right. I appreciate you bringing that to our attention.
And I just want you to know, Pete, I live out here in where I live and work with a bunch of American Indians. Okay. And they contacted me and thanked me for putting this word out. And I have been reached out by the American Indian community where they're telling me, thank you. Thank you for putting the word out because people don't. This happens all the time in their community. Women go missing, this and that, and nobody gets the word out. And again, I don't like to be political. I do sound like a Democrat when I'm saying this, but it's the facts are the facts. I'm going to tell the truth no matter if my party's affected or not. The fact is, we don't get the word out unless they're white, blonde hair, and blue eyes. And that's a fact. Minorities do not get the same treatment when they're missing as white people do. It's a fact.
It's a very sad fact. So everyone who's listening right now, please tune in to all of Danny's content, because every single video he's talking about a new case. How many times a day? 7 times a day or so, Danny's coming up with more facts, more victims, more missing persons. And so we are here to try to get the word out. I absolutely support that. And we're here to do everything we can to try to bring awareness to this. Now, Danny, before we jump into Menendez, I want to really quickly do a quick entertainment spotlight and just shine a little bit of a levity and a light on some of my brothers from East Tennessee. I'm actually wearing one of the shirts today for everyone watching on the video, Unholy Kells. This is a group called East Tennessee Hustle and Grind. They're a great bunch of young up-and-coming rappers from the East Tennessee area. They have a big show in Bristol, Tennessee tonight. So shout out Shaka Hustleman, B. Millie, of course, Kells, Spooky, Axel, the whole group. Anyone that's following your dreams in life, I respect it. And these guys I know personally, they're really good guys with good hearts, and they have good music. So shout out to everyone out there following your dreams.
That's awesome, Pete. That's awesome. And you know what? If we're still in the entertainment spotlight, could I say one other thing?
Absolutely, we are.
I just want to tell you this. Did you see who liked my video this week on Instagram?
I did, and that's a big entertainment spotlight. I know her as the lady from White Lotus. You know her more as Stifler's mom, right?
Yes. Now listen, I know I love White Lotus, and I thought she was excellent in that. But I think we all know her as Stifler's mom. Yes, true. Stifler's mom liked my video this week. She liked my video. Now listen, Pete. It's hard to realize. I get so many likes and so many comments. It just by chance I saw that she liked my video. Do you know what I mean? It was by chance.
Yeah.
And right now it's her liked my video. Tom Green has liked my video. The lead singer from the Pussycat Dolls have liked my video. Kat from Fox News is she follows me. So it's cool to see some celebrities following you. You know what I mean? And liking your stuff.
Danny, what are you going to do when one of these celebrities reaches out in the DMs and calls you Zaddy?
They probably will. I'm thinking Jennifer Coolidge. She's going to call me Zaddy. I can see it. She's going to DM me. Jennifer, are you going to DM me?
Jennifer, we welcome you. If you want to be a guest on the podcast, come on down, Jennifer. Or we'll have it.
Well, listen, we got 40 minutes, and we promised you the Menendez case, and we're going to give it to you. We just wanted to go over some stupid cases out there before. So listen, I think we all know about this case, Pete. And Pete, you are a lot younger than me, so do you still remember this pretty much or no?
Yeah, Danny. So I basically grew up in the 90s. So I grew up during the time that when you turned on the TV, especially at night, you see Lyle and Eric Menendez on every channel. Now, growing up, we only had 3 channels, 3, 9, and 12. We grew up in poverty, but every single channel had the Menendez brothers on it. So we were just completely swarmed with this case from every direction. And I was very young, so I didn't understand everything. But man, I tell you what, it made an impact on everyone's life.
Yes, I just recently watched their documentary. I guess it came out about, a month or so ago. And, it brought a lot of light to it. But I'm going to be honest with you guys. What really brought my attention to this case is my daughter. I think I told you, Pete, my daughter's a therapist.
Yeah.
And I was against the Menendez brothers getting resentenced. I was, because I saw how they killed their mother. I watched the documentary. But my daughter told me that just looking at them, hearing their story, she knows for a fact that they were molested. And I trust my daughter's judgment, her being a therapist, and she understands just looking at them, seeing what they do. She told me, Dad, they were victims. She could tell just being a therapist, the way they act, their personalities, that they were victims. But let's get into this, and then we'll decide if we think they're victims, if we think they should be resentenced. Does that sound good?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Danny, I'll just give us a brief start, and then you can jump in and tell everyone.
Go ahead.
So this took place in 1989 in Beverly Hills, California. Jose and Mary Louise Kitty Menendez were both unalived. And originally, on the night in 1989 when this happened, it was originally thought that this was a mob hit. It was a very bloody scene. Shotgun was the weapon of choice. And so originally, the 2 sons, Lyle and Eric, were not even suspects. Do you want to go ahead and give the listeners a little more context?
Yeah. And what happened, Pete, and we talked a little bit of this off air. They wanted to do this so quickly. They wanted to kill their parents so quickly that they went to a gun store. When California law, you have to wait 2 weeks back then to get a gun. And people are not going to believe this. Me and you talked about this. It's because when you buy a pistol, you can conceal the pistol. Okay, that's why you need a concealed weapons part, because pistols are small. It's totally different with shotguns. If you buy a shotgun, you could go right into Walmart right now, get a shotgun, and walk out with it. And that's what the Menendez brothers did. I have no idea why our state laws are like that, but our state laws are you need a permit to carry a pistol, but a fucking shotgun, ha ha, you can buy one of them tomorrow.
Wow, that really makes no sense to me. I mean, I guess I can see the concealment thing, but at the same time, they're both destructive, and the shotgun is arguably a lot more destructive than most
Yeah,
pistols.
oh, I agree. I agree.
That's kind of shocking to me.
I mean, if you shoot somebody with a shotgun, Pete, they're not getting up.
Yeah,
They're not getting up. They're dead. They are
and
dead.
absolutely. And so, what we know for sure about this case, Danny, we now know it was revealed that no, this was not a gang hit. Yes, the brothers did try to make it look like a hit. The brothers initially did try to make it look like someone else murdered their parents. And basically, from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, the brothers, after the after the demise of their parents, the brothers kind of went on a spending spree. They bought all kinds of stuff, Rolex watches, travel, tennis in Israel. One of them bought a bar in New Jersey, I believe. They were just spending hundreds of thousands of dollars immediately after. Now, granted, their parents were millionaires. I forgot to mention that. So Jose was a millionaire. I think he was worth over $10 million or so at the time of his death.
Yeah, that is 100% true. Listen, I was having trouble on my mic. You guys could hear me, right?
Yes, you're good
Oh,
here.
okay, yeah, I was having trouble while you were talking. I was trying to fix it. But yeah, he was a millionaire. And now, Pete, the Menendez brothers, of course, are saying that their father molested them. But then
Right.
you had one of the guys from the Menudo band who said that he molested them too.
Wow.
I don't know if you know that, right? Did you
I
hear
heard
that? Yeah.
about that.
So
Yeah.
I mean, the thing that bothers me, and I'm going to tell, and I want to see what everybody else says about this and how they feel about this. But the thing that bothers me is that why did they wait till they're in their 20s? You know what I mean? That when you kill, you could leave in your 20s. That kind of bothered me. Does that bother you a little bit, Peter? Or am I wrong by saying that? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're completely right. I completely agree. I think that it's really as more of this case developed, we start getting more and more clues and more revelations about why they say they did what they did, the motivations. Let's talk about really quickly though about the case itself. They actually went to trial. They were charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to murder, but the juries were unable to reach a verdict initially.
Right.
So it looked like they might go free initially, didn't it?
Yes, it did. And listen, I've been in trials like that, and I don't know what the judge said to them, but usually, like I was in a trial where the jury came back twice and said they couldn't make a decision.
Yeah.
The jury came back, told the judge, listen, we can't make a decision. You know what the judge told him in the case that I was involved in? The judge says, listen, the county spent a lot of money on this. Please go back in there and try again. Please give it one more try. And in my case, the jury came back and gave it within 5 minutes, said not guilty. That's the
Wow.
truth in one of my cases. So yes, that does happen where juries have trouble coming up with it, especially in a case like this. You know what I mean?
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. And Danny, I was just looking up the number. It did say that the brothers, during the time that after their parents were unalived until the time of the brothers being arrested, they spent around $700,000. So they spent close to $1 million of that money that they received. So it's needless to say, they were out there living large. They were blowing the money. And most people who were close to the situation said there was no remorse. There was no period of grief or no period of, really mourning for their parents. And so that's one of the reasons, obviously, that they looked like such strong suspects, which it turns out, of course, they were.
And you know what, Pete? We got, people on Instagram. I don't know if Facebook or anything saying, but people on Instagram are saying, the one person saying, listen, the fact is they weren't sexually assaulted. They were psychopaths that murdered their parents. And I'll tell you what, there's some people that feel that way, Pete. That certainly people feel that way, and they have the right to feel that way.
Yeah, everyone is entitled to an opinion. Of course, Danny, I was not there. I didn't see it. I don't know for sure. Now, I like to judge based on the context clues, based on the evidence that I can see, the witness testimony that I can hear. I do like to also hear from the people themselves, the actual accused. I like to look into their eyes if possible, if there's a video interview that we can watch. And like you mentioned, your daughter was able to kind of gain some knowledge based on watching them. Now, let's talk about that briefly. Let's talk about at what point did the Menendez brothers start talking about the abuse? They first started talking about the abuse to one of their own therapists.
Yes. But here's the thing, Pete. If you watch the documentary, when they got the lady attorney, okay, this is what bothers me. And I'm gonna be honest with you. As a police officer, I believe that once they got that lady attorney, she came up with this whole thing. Honestly, that was my original thought, that she came up with this, oh, we don't have a defense, so let's make it that you were molested. Honestly, that's how I felt. And honestly, my daughter convinced me differently, because I honestly thought that female attorney made this story up. That's just my opinion. After watching the documentary, I feel we didn't even talk about them being molested until she showed up.
That is another interesting thing. A lot of people cannot relate to this because a lot of people out here, we're just spectators. What some people don't understand, and I've delved into like psychology a little bit, trauma is passed on through different ways. People process and handle trauma in different ways. Sometimes people do, in fact, conceal their trauma. This is a fact. This is statistically proven. Now, not always, but sometimes they literally try to hide it.
And listen, especially dudes, right? They got to admit that's happened to them, correct?
Absolutely, Danny. Absolutely. Yeah. And I will say, just personally, I will admit I've gone through some different types of trauma. One type of trauma is actually growing up in poverty. Psychologists have measured that if you raise a child in poverty, it gives them an equal level of traumatic experience and traumatic stress as a sexual or physical abuse. Because growing up in poverty means the child does not know for sure where their next meal is going to come from. They don't know if their mom or dad is going to be able to provide for them. So unfortunately, I experienced that. I know a lot of people experience different levels of trauma. So I can just say, going through some things that I've experienced, I can understand a degree of trauma. Now, have I been through what the Menendez brothers claimed to have been through? No, I can't personally say that. But that's going to open up a bigger question, Danny, that we can get to in a moment, is even if they were abused, is that really a self-defense? Did they commit this act in self-defense, or was this act? Exactly. So that's another big question, right? As we'll dive into in the show.
And here's the thing that bothers me. And I'm just going to be honest with you guys, because I think this is a conversation we have to have. My thing is, how could it be self-defense when you're 20 and 19? You could physically beat the shit out of your dad at that point. Do you know what I mean? And you could you have money, you could leave, you can get your own home, you could get, like, that bothers me. I get that. And now you're talking, Pete, if they did this, was it revenge for the father now? And what about killing the mother? That's that thing. I don't know if you saw the documentary. I mean, the mother was crawling for her life, and they put another fucking bullet in her. I mean, they shot her while she was crawling for her life. I mean, honestly, I see both sides of this. I really do. And honestly, Pete, if it wasn't for my daughter telling me about trauma like you just told me and everything, I wouldn't believe it at all. My daughter really convinced me that, yes, these guys may have been molested. You know what I mean?
Well, if you're listening and viewing right now, feel free to chime in the comments with your opinions, because this is something that I don't think we know conclusively for sure what happened. We know the testimonies, and yes, some professionals can look at them and give their professional assertion of what they believe happened. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of questions surrounding this case. One thing we do know, and that I want to talk about really quick, is the father, Jose Menendez. He was definitely the target. He was the main target. The mother, maybe more so of she was a witness. But the reason that we believe Jose was the main target, according to the sons, according to people who worked with him, Jose was a self-made millionaire. He came from Cuba to America, first-generation millionaire. He worked very hard to work his way up, and he was known as being very ruthless in business. He was known as being a hard businessman, a hard boss, and also a tough dad. So he had a reputation. So from your understanding of this case, he was like the 99% target, right?
Yes. And you know what? We got another comment, and I want to give their comments that we're getting on Instagram. Listen,
Yes.
the mother survived briefly. They went back, reloaded, and shot her in the face. They are pure monsters. And I'm going to tell you this.
Mm.
Our followers and our people that are listening to this podcast, I would say 75% of them are against the Menendez brothers.
Yeah.
Just looking at the comments, McBlue just made a comment. They had options to get away. They were grown men.
Yeah. Well, Danny, let's just assert for a second, for the sake of argument, that okay, let's say they were abused, because I don't know if they were, they weren't. Let's say they were. Even if they were, what you just told me they did to the mother, that's heinous, that's unforgivable, that's unacceptable. Shooting someone in the face is a clear act of personal vengeance, vendetta, hate. You know, from being a law enforcement officer, if someone gets shot in the face or the head, that's personal usually. And
Yeah,
so,
and especially if somebody kills somebody with a knife, it's personal too. If you
yeah,
stab somebody, there's all kind of different things. I just, you know, we don't know what, you know what, I sit here and I think, why would they do this? Why would they do this? But Pete, this is what I say. We weren't molested. They were. So I don't know what their mindset was and this and that. I don't know, but I could tell you this. I have someone DM'd me through TikTok and they told me the DA that left, the district attorney that wanted to resentence them that left, they said the only reason he did that, Pete, he wanted to get reelected and he was losing so badly that he decided to say, I'm going to release the Menendez brothers. He thought that would get him votes to get him elected, which it didn't. So then the Republican gets elected and the Republican comes in and says, I'm not releasing these guys. But now I just noticed, I don't know if you saw this today, Newsom, the governor is now thinking about doing something with them because now, like say a president cannot pardon these guys, okay,
right,
because it's not a federal crime. But
right.
Newsom could. Newsom could get them out.
Interesting. So from what I'm hearing, Danny, and clarify if this is not correct, but from what I'm hearing, according to the governor and the district attorney, they are now, the current sitting district attorney is now saying that they can go ahead with resentencing. However, he is not on board with releasing them. Is that correct?
That's correct. He doesn't want to resentence them at all. He thinks this is exactly what he said, Pete. He feels this is all lies.
Mm.
He thinks the defense came up with this story, thinks it's lies. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not a fan of defense attorneys. I think if you watch my content, you will realize that I believe they're nothing but liars. They're liars that get paid to lie. They're fake truth seekers. They act like we're part of the court system. You ain't part of the court system. You get paid to lie. Okay, that's basically what you do. You come up with a scam and you hope people believe it. If you watch the documentary, once that female attorney gets in this case, all of a sudden they were molested. All of a sudden now they were molested. You didn't hear anything about them being molested until then.
Well, Danny, you know how to tell if an attorney is telling the truth or not, right?
What?
Do you know how to tell if an attorney is telling the truth or not?
How?
If their lips are moving, they're lying. No, I'm just joking. Hey, there's probably, and I can't say probably, I know there's some great attorneys out there who are fighting for what's right. But you're right, Danny. The whole occupation of lawyers has obviously been very tinged and very soiled for many, many years, many decades. There's a lot of liars in there. There's a lot of great attorneys and politicians that should just be working in Hollywood with me. They should be on movie sets instead of out there in the courtroom, because they're messing up people's lives. Now, don't get me started on them.
Seriously, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of defense attorneys at all. I mean, basically, they lie. They try to make cops look bad. They try to make victims look bad, all for their success. Like, I feel good about being a content creator, right? I got all kind of messages today. Thank you from the American Indian community saying that I got the word out. I get all these nice messages. I got called a zaddy today. So I feel good about what I'm doing. When I was a cop, I felt good about what I'm doing. Like, how do you go home, Pete, and say, you know what? I'm defending Brian Kohlberger that murdered 4 young kids and took them away from their family. And you know what? I'm gonna lie to get them off. Like, how do you go home and like, boy, honey, what's for fucking dinner? I'm gonna get a fucking murderer off. I just attorneys, answer me that question. How do you fucking sleep? How do you sleep at night? Honestly, your profession is horrible. It's a bunch of liars. And then let's not even talk about attorneys for suing people. That's even worse. That's even worse.
Yeah, Absolutely. That's a whole nother can of worms. That's a whole nother
Yes.
episode topic that we could jump into. But back to the Menendez case, I want to bring up a comment that I see here on YouTube from McBlue. McBlue says they were old enough to get away when they committed this act. They had the option to go and they were grown men. That's such a true statement. So even if the abuse was true, okay, let's talk about the act. Let's talk about 1989. They made the decision to do this. Now, there's absolutely nothing that I've seen in the court documents, the documentaries, or any evidence to show that this was an act of self-defense.
See, I agree too. I mean, how could you say it was self-defense? They're 20 years old. If you're going to have sex with your, I hate to be graphic about this, but if you're going to have sex with your father at 20 years old, you're doing it. Okay. You're not, there's no self-defense. Okay. You're not a kid anymore. Like if they would have done something to their parents when they were 13, 14-year-old boys, it was different. When you're grown ass men and then you go spend $1 million after you fucking murdered them and your mom's crawling for safety and you shoot her in the face, I'm sorry, that gives me doubts. And like I said, if it wasn't for my daughter being a therapist, I'd be 100% against them. I really would.
Yeah, Danny, I think that, you know, when we look at this, we examine the entire case. Yes, this could be a very prevalent fact about their history, about their relationship with their father. The fact that it wasn't brought up till the female lawyer came into the picture, that is very questionable. However, we know for sure that one of the brothers was talking to a therapist, and we know for sure that they have been alleging this for a long time. We know they've been alleging this abuse. But that brings us forward to the act in 1989 when it transpired. You know, I don't think that we can at any point in time say that they conclusively did this because of that. Now, that might have added fuel to the fire, but we could talk a little bit more. And maybe if we get a therapist or a psychologist on the show one day, we can ask them their opinion. But I think that there are residual effects of trauma. There's brainwashing, there's programming, there's things that happen when you grow up in a certain household, when you grow up being told a certain thing or in a certain environment. So these kids might have been very screwed up. Obviously, we're very screwed up.
Yeah.
What it is, right?
And listen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember from the documentary, the one brother then molested the other brother.
Danny, that just that triggers me just hearing it. That makes me angry because I have siblings.
Right.
Yeah.
It's horrible. It's totally horrible. Honestly, it's horrible. I mean, if the father did this to them, if he did this to them, I hate to say, he deserves it. The father deserves it. If the father molested these two kids, he deserves what he got. But the thing is, how do we know he did it? We don't. You know what I mean? That's the thing. And you know, Pete, back then in the when did this happen again? In the early 90s, correct? Oh, 89 it was, right?
Place, yeah.
Back then you didn't talk about this molesting either.
No. There was a different culture, Danny. There was definitely a different culture, specifically within the role of masculinity and the role of being a man, being a strong young man. Even as I was coming up, I was told by many different sources, many different people in my environment, oh, suck it up. You know, men don't cry. Men don't talk about their problems. Pick yourself up by your bootstraps and just suck it up and just go. Just live life. I was told these type of things. So I get it. It was not in their culture. However, we now know in the year 2025, we know that we're all human, male and female humans. We all have emotions. We all have a spectrum of emotions, and we have to deal with these things because if we don't, it's like a Coke bottle being shaken up. You can only shake a Coke bottle so much before it explodes.
I totally agree. Totally agree. I just, you know, I don't know why I don't 100% believe them. And I don't know if I'll ever 100% believe them, honestly. And I just thought it was, first of all, if you watch the documentary, they weren't likable.
Right.
They weren't. I mean, if you watch the documentary, they were not likable people. They did not make them likable in the documentary. They really didn't.
Yeah, Danny, that's one thing. Way before the documentary came out, when I was watching these guys on the news as I was growing up, I would see them and I would see their faces, and literally it would just be the headline: Menendez brothers murder their parents, and then it would show like a close-up zoom in on their face, and most of the time they just had stone cold faces. So I don't know if this was a media portrayal that even starting back then, the media tried to make them look not likable, or if maybe they just come off that way. But they definitely, until the fact of the abuse and all those things, that I did not feel sorry for them at all. You know, oh, it's very sad to me that you're growing up in a multi-million-dollar household in Beverly Hills when I had to grow up in poverty. You see how I can't relate to that. You see how I can't look at that and be sad. You know?
Right, right, exactly. And listen, I grew up in a middle class, but we didn't have a lot of money either, Pete. I mean, honestly, like I think back at the stuff that went on in my house, and my parents just probably hid it from me. But I don't think we had a lot of money either. You know what I mean? They probably just hid it from me. You know what I mean? But
Right.
back then, like everybody, it was weird because we didn't talk in my area anyway. We didn't really look at like who was rich, who was poor. I think we look at that more now. Like when I grew up in the 80s, nobody looked at that like that. I didn't look at like, oh my God, his parents have more money than my parents. Like, I don't know. When I was a kid, we didn't look at it that way. I don't know, for some reason.
Yeah, I think that with social media, with just the way that attention spans are so short, we've been that's another thing that we're being programmed to do. We're being kind of brainwashed by mass media, by music, by entertainment and everything to try to evaluate someone's value based on that, or try to assess someone based on just the clothes they wear, the house they live in. And it's really a tragedy because that prevents you from seeing another person as they are. Who is this individual that I'm talking to?
Exactly. There's more judgmental people today than there was back in. I agree with her there, 100%. People
Yeah,
didn't judge in the 80s. Honestly, Pete, like we never looked down on people like, oh, this guy's poor, this guy's rich. Like that wasn't even discussed when I was a kid. You know what I
no,
mean? I know kids discuss it now. Oh, he has old shoes, I have new shoes, he got new sneakers. Back then, we all got the same Kmart shoes and they were $10. I
right.
swear to God, Pete, my mom would take me to Kmart and there was the same sneaker at Kmart. We all wore them. My friends all had the same sneaker because that's all we wore. They were $10 at Kmart.
Yeah.
10 or $5.
Accepted it. It was cool. So
Yeah.
yeah, in a different world today. I think today, finally in 2025, we now have a little bit more of a spotlight on that. We're trying to teach young people that bullying is not correct, that that's not the correct way to treat your fellow classmates and your fellow students. Just because someone may be on welfare or they may not be able to afford the new Nike Air Jordans doesn't mean they're a bad person. And so it's very sad, but I think we're finally making some progress, at least I hope we are, in a positive direction here. What do you
Yeah,
think?
I think so. And like you said, we can't relate. Me and you can't relate to the Menendez brothers being rich. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? We couldn't just go out and buy cars, and we didn't get brand new cars when we were 16. We didn't get, you know what I mean? I
yeah,
can't relate to what kind of lifestyle they lived. But the only thing I could go by is what I've seen. And what I've seen, I'm not 100% convinced. If it wasn't for my daughter, I wouldn't be convinced at all. It wouldn't
yeah.
be convinced at all. I don't know how you feel about it. Are you kind of iffy too, Pete, or how do you feel?
Well, Danny, I will say by the end of this podcast, by the end of this episode, I will give you my definite synopsis. But I'll just go ahead and generally say right now, I'm leaning towards the fact that these kids, these young men, committed a gruesome act as adults, as young adults, who may have been traumatized. Yes, maybe that plays a factor, but they obviously committed this horrible, heinous act, especially when it comes to the mother. The mother who is not guilty, who is not even accused of being an abuser, and who they went back to reload the gun for. And then they made up this alibi trying to buy tickets for the Batman movie and saying, oh, we're watching Batman, we're in the movies. So I'm definitely not leaning towards their side. I'll say that right now. Honestly.
Listen, we got another one. Changed the story too many times. We got a Facebook comment. Good. We finally got a Facebook comment.
Yeah. Thank
We got a lot of Instagram, a lot of things. But I tell you, we got a lot of people in right now, Pete, and a lot of people are interested in this case. And right, they changed their story too many times. Here's the thing. Like I'm gonna go back to you're 20 years old. You can walk out of the house. You have all the money in the world.
Yes. Insane. All the opportunities in the world, Danny. Princeton, playing tennis overseas, just literally what I don't know the current stats, Danny, but at least while I was researching this a few years ago, it was a very, very small percentage of America or the world who enjoyed that type of wealth, that level of financial freedom, where literally they could go and do what they wanted. Yes, I know mom and dad might have been strict, but at the same time, they're going home to their Beverly Hills mansion every day, and that was the life they wanted out of. But
Right.
like Big Blue said earlier in the comments, they could have walked out of that life. They could have chosen to distance themselves. Would they have been cut off from the money? Probably so. And is that why they did it? I don't know.
Listen, we got a comment here from Angela. The mother knew. But does that give them the right to murder her when they're 20 years old? I just listen to the people. If they did this when they were 13 or 14, yes, they were adults that could have walked out of the house, and them going and spending $1 million after they murdered their parents. You know,
Let me
I have trouble. I do have trouble. I do.
Me too. And while I'll definitely give Angela credit for that statement if the mother knew. Let's see what Debbie says here. The mother might have known, but that doesn't mean they needed to unalive her like that. Absolutely. So let's propose a scenario, Danny. I just want to say an imaginary scenario. Let's say that these kids were 13 and 15 and this was happening. Let's say that this was a night that these kids were going home and their father was abusing them. He was doing horrible things to them. Let's assume that one night at age 15, he calls them into the bedroom. He says, hey, this is what's going to happen tonight. And at that moment, then they pull out a shotgun and shoot him. Now, if that's, I'm just proposing this scenario, Danny, because if that happened in the heat of the moment and they were trying to get away from a current active act of abuse,
I'm finding them not guilty.
then I could see that as being self-defense 100%.
Right.
But something where years later, they were now strong enough adults. They could fight to some extent. They could choose. They can go out there and vote. They can go fight for our country as soldiers. They're old enough. They're legal adults now. So they have the choice to be responsible as adults or to choose a criminal act. That's
and
what
don't forget, and we're not even talking about, I guess they'd get their parents' money too if they're dead too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And they enjoyed it for a short period of time, Danny. Lyle was arrested on March 8th, 1990, outside their Beverly Hills home, and Eric turned himself in 3 days later after he returned to Los Angeles from playing tennis over in Israel. So they enjoyed a little bit of big life, $700,000 worth from August of '89 until March of 1990. So not even a year, not even half a year, but about half a year where they were just living large until they were finally arrested. So obviously at that point, the spending stops.
Yeah. And Pete, I mention this in my videos a lot, and people out there, you're probably going to say I'm right. Do you ever notice these things always happen to rich people? Do you ever notice that? It's always rich people, religious people. It's always these people. Honestly, it's always. Think about the Murdoch case last year. I don't know if you remember that. The Murdoch case. Rich guy, rich lawyer. These people, rich people. The John Benet Ramsey case, rich people. Always rich people. It's always religious people. It's always pastors. It's always reverends. So that's why I stay out of religion too.
Yeah. Earlier today about the pastor in Texas, I believe, who is accused of more criminal acts. Like it's on and on and on. And it's
exactly. Yeah, it's horrible. It's totally horrible.
That actually reminds me of one case that we might talk about in the future. And for me, Danny, as I mentioned, growing up in poverty, I mean, we didn't have much at all. I dreamed about being rich. I dreamed about having plenty of money and being financially free. And then a few years ago, we had the horrible tragedy in our home city of Las Vegas. We had the huge, horrible mass shooting in Vegas. And this was by a very, very rich man, a guy who had lots of properties and millions of dollars worth of assets. He literally transported lots of weapons into his hotel room over at Mandalay Bay or Delano and just unloaded. And I still can't fathom that. I can't fathom having what most people in society would say, oh, you have the dream. You have everything that anyone could want. You have everything money could buy, but yet you're still going to do horrible, heinous things. So I don't get that personally. That doesn't resonate with me. I don't know.
And you know what? I'm really glad you brought that case up, Pete, because I did get a DM today.
Okay.
And the DM said that they want us to do a podcast on that.
Okay.
And you know what? That's a real good one to do. And Pete, I might be able to get some people. I actually know somebody was there. So maybe we could get somebody that was actually at the concert on the podcast so we can get at least a firsthand view of what happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. That's a very polarizing case as well. It's obviously a devastating case. I spent probably several hours down the rabbit hole, just literally scrolling through videos and I was trying to figure out why this guy did it, Danny. I still don't know his motivation. So maybe when we're not talking about the Menendez, we will talk about that case in the future. But like Angela did mention in the comments, it is not always the rich people, but it does seem like it does happen often. Sometimes these crimes are done out of desperation. Often these crimes are done out of what people say, oh, I needed to feed my family, so I robbed a bank. And so, yes, there is the stratification of the people who are involved in these crimes, but it to me it's alarming how many of these cases take place with wealthy people involved.
I agree. And let me tell you something. Living in Vegas, I deal with wealthy people on a daily basis.
Yes.
Okay. And people don't realize how wealthy people are here.
Right.
Okay. Rolls Royces, I see them daily here. Okay. I see them daily. I never seen one till I moved to Vegas, and now I see them daily. So rich people are obnoxious. They think they're better than you. And I don't like being around them. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't. I stay away from rich people. I really do. I think they're obnoxious and they're not fun to be around. I'm just being
You
honest
know,
with you.
Danny, that brings me up to a very interesting subject that I wanted to mention. I used to kind of just think, okay, once I'm rich one day, that'll mean I have it all figured out. Life will just open up for me, and I'll have the world in the palm of my hands. I used to think that because I grew up kind of glamorized by media, music, social media, whatever, or even before social media started, when MySpace started, they started advertising this stuff. But Danny, as I started working in the Hollywood industry, I've started working around a lot of very wealthy, successful people. And I will tell you, there's a noticeable difference between most of the celebrities I work with who are rich and then the average wealthy person out here who you or me might run into in Vegas, like The Rock, Mr. Beast, Tyler Perry, Steve Harvey, Tom Cruise. These are great people who they're all stand-up guys in real life. Like I would tell you, like hand to the Bible right now, they're good guys, I
Right.
believe. But a lot of rich people like that. So I think that a lot of rich people are not. And so I think there's a difference between someone who enters the public eye and they know, okay, I'm an entertainer now, I'm an actor now, I'm a movie star, I'm the biggest YouTuber or whatever. They know that the public eye is always on them. So Shaquille O'Neal, he's the greatest example. Everyone I've known that's talked to Shaq and met Shaq says Shaquille O'Neal is one of the kindest hearted, most cool, down to earth people you'll ever meet. Have you ever heard anything bad about Shaq?
Never. I love Shaq.
Yeah, he's got a
I
great
love him.
reputation, and he personally says it's because he's like you're gonna interact with people no matter what. You might as well be remembered for being a good person. They're gonna remember you some way. So why be a jerk? Why act like you're better than them just because you have assets? So it is interesting as we're talking about these crimes and these cases, how many of these criminals seem to have it made. They seem like they had everything from the outside looking in.
And you know what? It's so strange because, like you said, that family, the Menendez family, they could have had everything,
Yeah.
everything, money, of two kids. It could have been a great family, but instead this happens. But it's insane. So I'm going to come to the conclusion. We got 7 minutes here. I'm going to come to the conclusion that I'm in the middle on this. I'm not sure I go either way, but sometimes I lean towards they're guilty. I'm going to be honest with you.
Yeah.
What about you, Pete?
Danny, as we're summarizing it up and summing up this podcast, I will have to say that personally, yes, I think they are guilty of the murder. I think they're guilty of the unaliving of their mom and dad. They admitted doing it. There was nothing in the immediate environment on that night in question that leads me to believe that this was a defensive act or an act of self-preservation. This was an act of there's definitely was, in my opinion, there's definitely a lot of maliciousness, a lot of vengeful spirit involved, a lot of anger involved. However, they could have made other decisions. They could have handled this many, many different ways. They chose to handle it this way. They chose to try to cover it up, and then they chose to live big on almost $750,000 and travel the world.
Yeah,
So
and
for all,
and they could have went to the police too, Pete.
absolutely,
They could have went to the police. There's to me there's no way you can say self defense in this. You can't. How do you
now,
bring up self defense? Were they in trouble when they ran in Christmas and killed their parent? I mean, no. I mean, I don't know. I
now,
go either way on this case. depending when I wake up.
Yeah. We both remember, Danny, as young men, as adolescents, as young people, your head's not very developed yet. You're young and they say that the term is young and dumb. You're kind of stupid when you're young in terms of you just haven't learned about life yet. So in their 18 and in their 20-year-old mind, there's no telling how many different scenarios they came up with, how the wheels were turning to get them to formulate this plot. They might have said, oh, we can't tell on our dad because our dad is rich and powerful, so the police will never believe us over him. He'll just pay the police off, maybe. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. There could have been a million reasons why they said, oh, we're not going to do this. But the conclusion that they came to, Danny, what I'm going to say, my opinion is, yes, they're guilty of this act, and this is absolutely uncalled for and unacceptable.
And listen, she brings up a good point. Angela brings up a good point. A powerful rich man that works with musicians, they would never believe the children. And think about, she's kind of right. Back then, they definitely would not. You're talking about a different time than it is now, Pete. Like now, if they came out, if they were children now and came out, yes, people would believe them. But back in the 80s, that shit wasn't talked about. It really wasn't. It was a different time. So I kind of agree with her there. I do agree with her there.
I think even I would tend to agree as well. I think it would be hard pressed to convince the authorities. However, even in 89, we had recording devices. These guys were rich. They could have bought a camcorder, it would have been a bigger camcorder in 89, but they had camcorders. They also had tape recorders back then, Danny. They could have got some kind of evidence. They could have built a case and they could have developed some proof and then gone to the authorities. They could have done different things. And of course they didn't, because as Debbie said, yes, they planned the unaliving. They planned that instead of going to the authorities.
Well, I'm going to say this. As I look through our comments on Instagram, Facebook, and here, I would say it's about 90% people are against the Menendez brothers. Angela's probably on her own right now. I'm going to be totally honest with you. Because Instagram, they were bashing them. I don't know what Facebook was doing. We only had a couple comments on Facebook, but
yeah.
But I'm going to say our followers right now are swaying that the Menendez brothers were wrong and shouldn't be resentenced. I'm going to be honest with you, just from the comments here that I'm getting. But listen, let's talk about next week. Next week, I want to do a paranormal case. I don't know if we can get to, do you want to try to do that next week?
Yeah, absolutely. I know it's something we've talked about since the show started, so I think that people will be really interested to tune in for that.
All right, next week, I'm going to try to get a medium on. So if anybody knows a good medium that could read me and Pete, are you okay with that? I don't know what your religion is. I don't want to offend you.
I mean, I've never done that in my life before. So I don't know. Like, I mean, what are they going to do? Look at me and tell me my future? I mean, I just don't know.
I had it twice. I did live twice when I got medium readings twice live. Okay. I did that on TikTok and I did it on Facebook. And basically what they do is they're going to speak to the dead. Anybody that's passed away, they could come back and talk to you, stuff like that. They'll tell you your future, shit like that. I think we should do it.
Hey, it definitely sounds interesting. So we can definitely talk about that for the next show. McBlue says Bigfoot.
Well, you know what I'll do? What we'll do, McBlue, is we'll make it a whole paranormal show next week. If I can get a medium, I will try to get a medium. So I will work on this as soon as we get off. I think it'd be a fun show. I think people would come. And even if we can get a criminal psychic, where maybe we can ask them, they could do a medium thing, and we could also ask them about criminal cases. You know what I mean? And we'll get a criminal medium in. Yeah, that'd be good.
That's something I was interested in. Is are one of these mediums going to be able to tell us the outcome of one of our cases?
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I'm going to work on this because I'm friends with a bunch of them on TikTok, but I want a good one. I don't want a fake one. I want a good one. So if anybody knows anybody, refer them to us. We got a week to find somebody.
Okay. And as Mick Blue is mentioning Bigfoot, we have there's a lot of cryptids out there. I don't know if you know cryptids. Cryptozoology is the study of animals that have not been proven, such as Bigfoot or Chupacabra, the Loch Ness Monster. So yeah, there are so many things we could talk about, especially as we get into Halloween, Danny. We're going to really dive into the paranormal for Halloween. But yeah, we might as well go ahead and talk about some stuff in the meantime.
Yeah, and listen, I want to invite everybody to our live. We will start our live on TikTok at 8:30. It's been popular. We've been having fun with it. So make sure you come back for our live. And can't wait till next week. And shout out to our new sponsors. Next week, we will unravel, unreal. What do you call it? Reveal.
Yeah,
Our sponsors' names, like I said, one's going to be an attorney, one's going to be a real estate agent. We have 4 more sponsor spots set up yet, so there's still room if you want to sponsor the show.
absolutely. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to everyone who's listening on all platforms. We encourage you to please leave us a review. It helps us grow, and please share the podcast with anyone you know.
Yes, and just if you want to email me, call me Zaddy. That's my new name. I'm Zaddy.
Big Zaddy. Big Zaddy.
Big Zaddy. I'm Big Zaddy.
I love it.
All right, man. We'll see everybody next week. Thanks, Pete.
Have a good night. See you
All
guys.
right.
Do the cash walk, do the cash walk. Hey, I'm leaving flaming footprints on the asphalt. Pop your collar, twist your wrist, do the cash walk. I'm dropping dollars while you're wishing on.